The year was 1952, and Staff Sergeant William Crawford thought he had seen the worst of what military service could offer. He had survived the brutal winters of Korea, endured months of rationed supplies, and watched good men disappear into the frozen wasteland, never to return. But nothing could have prepared him for what awaited him at the newly constructed radar installation deep within the Alaskan wilderness, 70 miles north of Fairbanks. What started as a routine assignment to maintain communications equipment at a classified military outpost would become the most terrifying experience of his life. An experience that would leave him questioning not just what lived beneath the permafrost, but whether some secrets were meant to stay buried forever. This is the story of what lurks beneath the Arctic military base. The mist, which hangs before you, offers you a choice to pass through or to escape. Beyond it are stories which defy explanation and fly in the face of what we know to be real. It is a void of both reality and impossibility, of both fact and superstition. You alone are left to discern what to believe as you pass through what we call the fog of war. In the early 1950s, the Cold War was reaching a fever pitch. The Soviet Union had successfully tested their first atomic bomb, and American military strategists were scrambling to establish early warning systems along the northern frontier. The distant Early Warning Line, or DW line, as it came to be known, was a chain of radar stations stretching across the Arctic, designed to detect incoming Soviet bombers before they could reach populated areas of North America. One of these installations, designated Station Echo 7, was built in a location so remote that supply runs could only be made during the brief summer months when the ice roads became passable. The rest of the year, the 30-man crew was completely cut off from the outside world, left to monitor their equipment and maintain their vigil against the communist threat from across the Bering Strait. The construction of Echo 7 had been plagued with problems from the very beginning. During the initial excavation for the underground facilities, work crews had encountered what engineers described as unusual geological formations. The permafrost, which should have been solid as concrete, contained strange pockets of softer earth that seemed to pulse with an unnatural warmth. More disturbing were the sounds that construction workers reported hearing from deep within these cavities, sounds that resembled breathing, or perhaps something much larger moving far below the surface. When Staff Sergeant Crawford arrived at Echo 7 in late October, the base was already operating under what the commanding officer called unusual circumstances. 3 men had been transferred out for what were officially listed as medical reasons, though the nature of their conditions was never specified in their files. The remaining crew members seemed jumpy, constantly glancing toward the floors and walls, as if expecting something to emerge from within the very structure of the building itself. Crawford was assigned to the night shift in the communications bunker, a reinforced concrete chamber built 15 ft below ground level. The bunker housed the main radio equipment, telegraph systems, and the classified frequency monitoring devices used to intercept Soviet transmissions. It was considered the safest and most secure part of the entire installation, which made what happened there all the more inexplicable. His first week passed without incident. The work was routine, mostly involving equipment checks and logging incoming messages from other DW line stations. The isolation was profound, with only the steady hum of the radio equipment and the occasional howl of Arctic wind to break the silence. But during his second week, Crawford began to notice something that would fundamentally change his understanding of what was possible in this frozen corner of the world. It started with the sounds. Every night around 0200 hours, Crawford would hear what he initially assumed was the building settling, or perhaps the heating system cycling on. But as the nights progressed, he realized these sounds were coming from beneath the floor of the communications bunker, not from the heating ducts or water pipes, but from somewhere much deeper, as if something massive was moving through the earth itself. The sounds were rhythmic, almost like footsteps, but far too large and spaced too far apart to belong to any human being. Whatever was making them seemed to be following a deliberate path, moving from one side of the bunker to the other before disappearing entirely. Crawford timed these movements and discovered they lasted exactly 17 minutes each night, always beginning at the same time, always following the same pattern. When he mentioned this to his relief operator, Corporal Martinez, the man's face went pale. Martinez explained that he had been hearing similar sounds during his day shifts, but had assumed they were caused by the permafrost shifting due to temperature changes. The fact that Crawford was experiencing the same phenomena at night, when the temperatures were at their coldest and the ground should have been most stable, suggested something far more unsettling. The two men decided to investigate. Using a portable seismic detector borrowed from the base's geological survey equipment, they began monitoring the vibrations beneath the communications bunker. What they discovered defied all logical explanation. The seismic readings showed movement patterns that were not consistent with any known natural phenomenon. The vibrations were too regular, too purposeful, and far too massive to be caused by shifting earth or underground water flow. More disturbing was the discovery that these movements were not random. The seismic data revealed a complex network of tunnels or cavities extending far beyond the boundaries of the military installation. Whatever was down there had created an elaborate underground system that stretched for miles in every direction, with the communications bunker sitting directly above what appeared to be a major intersection of these passages. Crawford and Martinez brought their findings to the attention of Lieutenant Harrison, the base commander. Harrison listened to their report with growing concern, not because he doubted their observations, but because he had been receiving similar reports from other crew members for weeks. The kitchen staff had complained about strange vibrations in the mess hall. The radar operators had reported unusual electromagnetic interference that seemed to emanate from below their equipment. Even the motor pool mechanics had noticed that vehicles parked directly on the ground experienced mysterious mechanical failures, while those kept elevated on maintenance platforms remained unaffected. What Harrison revealed next would change everything Crawford thought he knew about their mission at Echo 7. The base commander explained that Echo 7 was not just another radar installation. It had been deliberately constructed at this specific location because of anomalous readings detected by geological surveys conducted in 1949. The official mission was radar monitoring, but a secondary classified objective involved investigating what military scientists believed might be a previously unknown mineral deposit with potential strategic value. The construction problems they had encountered were not accidents or equipment failures. They were the result of breaking into something that had been undisturbed beneath the permafrost for an unknown period of time. The warm pockets of earth, the strange sounds, the electromagnetic interference were all symptoms of having awakened something that perhaps should have remained dormant. Harrison showed Crawford and Martinez classified photographs taken during the initial excavation. The images revealed cavities in the permafrost that were far too large and perfectly formed to be natural. More unsettling were the markings found on the walls of these spaces, markings that appeared to have been carved or worn smooth by something moving through them repeatedly over a very long period of time. The photographs also showed what appeared to be organic material embedded in the ice, material that the base geologist had been unable to identify. Dark, fibrous structures that seemed to pulse with their own internal rhythm, as if they were somehow still alive despite being frozen solid for possibly thousands of years. But it was the final photograph that made Crawford's blood run cold. Deep within one of the larger cavities, the camera had captured something that defied explanation. A shadow or silhouette that was unmistakably massive, unmistakably alive, and unmistakably aware that it was being observed. The base commander closed the file and looked directly at both men. "Gentlemen, what I'm about to tell you is classified at the highest levels. 3 days ago, we lost contact with the geological survey team that was investigating the lower chambers." Crawford felt his stomach drop as the implications of Harrison's words sank in. The geological survey team had been working directly in the areas where they had been detecting the mysterious movements. If contact had been lost, it meant that whatever was down there had moved beyond passive observation to direct interaction. "Sir, what exactly happened to the survey team?" Martinez asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Harrison pulled out another folder, this one marked with red classification stamps across every page. Dr. Kellerman's team consisted of 4 specialists. They had been conducting systematic explorations of the tunnel network for the past 2 weeks, using rope systems and portable lighting to map the passages. Their last radio transmission came in at 14:30 hours on Tuesday. They reported finding a chamber significantly larger than anything they had previously encountered, with what Kellerman described as evidence of recent activity. The base commander paused, seeming to weigh his words carefully before continuing. The transmission was cut off mid-sentence. When the backup communication team attempted to re-establish contact, they received only static. A search party was organized immediately, but when they reached the entrance to the tunnel system, they found something that made them abort the mission and return to the surface. Crawford and Martinez exchanged glances. Neither man wanted to hear what came next, but both knew they needed to understand the full scope of what they were dealing with. The entrance had been sealed, Harrison continued, not collapsed from structural failure, but deliberately blocked from the inside. Massive chunks of ice and frozen earth had been systematically placed to prevent anyone from entering or leaving. The engineering required to move materials of that size would have required heavy machinery, but the survey team had only descended with hand tools and climbing equipment. The implications were staggering. Something with tremendous strength had trapped the survey team underground, or worse, had prevented something else from escaping to the surface. Either scenario suggested an intelligence and capability that far exceeded anything they had been prepared to encounter. Harrison stood and walked to the small window overlooking the main compound. The Arctic wind was howling outside, driving snow across the landscape in horizontal sheets that made visibility impossible beyond a few yards. "There's more, gentlemen. Since the survey team disappeared, the seismic activity has increased dramatically. The movements beneath the base are no longer following the regular patterns you documented. They're becoming more frequent, more aggressive, and they're spreading to areas that were previously inactive." Crawford felt a chill that had nothing to do with the Arctic cold. "Sir, are you saying that whatever is down there knows we're here? That it's responding to our presence?" "That's exactly what I'm saying, Sergeant. And based on the electromagnetic readings we've been collecting, I believe it's been studying us just as intensively as we've been studying it. The interference patterns suggest a form of communication or scanning that operates on frequencies we don't fully understand. Whatever is beneath this base possesses capabilities that are far beyond our current scientific knowledge." Martinez stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the concrete floor. "With all due respect, sir, what exactly are we dealing with here? Are we talking about some kind of animal that survived in the ice, a new species, or something else entirely?" Harrison turned back to face them, and Crawford could see the strain of the past few days etched in the lines around the officer's eyes. "I wish I could give you a definitive answer, Corporal. What I can tell you is that Dr. Kellerman's preliminary reports suggested we're dealing with something that doesn't fit into any known biological classification. The organic material we found shows cellular structures that are unlike anything in our databases. More concerning is that laboratory analysis indicates this material has been actively growing and changing since we first disturbed it." The room fell silent except for the distant hum of the base's generators and the ever-present wind outside. Crawford tried to process what he was hearing, but every logical explanation seemed to fall short of the evidence they had uncovered. Whatever was beneath Echo 7 was intelligent, powerful, and apparently very much alive. "Sir, what are our orders?" Crawford finally asked. "Are we evacuating the base? Calling in additional support?" Harrison shook his head grimly. "Negative on both counts, Sergeant. This installation is too strategically important to abandon, and the classified nature of what we've discovered means that outside support is not an option. We're on our own until further notice." The base commander walked to his desk and pulled out 2 additional files. "However, we are implementing new security protocols immediately. All personnel are restricted to the upper levels of the base. After 1,800 hours, no one is to enter the lower sections alone, and all work in areas adjacent to the tunnel system is suspended indefinitely." He handed each man a file containing detailed maps of the base's underground sections, with large red X marks indicating areas that were now off-limits. Crawford noticed that nearly half of the facility's lower level had been designated as restricted, including several critical equipment rooms and storage areas. Additionally, we're establishing a continuous monitoring system. I'm assigning both of you to work with our remaining technical staff to set up seismic and electromagnetic sensors throughout the accessible portions of the base. If whatever is down there makes any move toward the surface, the Eye want to know about it immediately. Martinez studied his map, tracing the restricted areas with his finger. "Sir, if we can't access these sections, how do we maintain the equipment that's located there? Some of this gear is essential for our primary mission." "We don't," Harrison replied bluntly. "As of right now, our primary mission has changed. Radar monitoring is secondary to survival and intelligence gathering. Washington has been briefed on our situation, and new priorities are being established. Our job is to learn everything we can about what's beneath this base while keeping it contained until experts can be brought in to deal with it properly." Crawford felt a growing sense of unease as he realized the full implications of their situation. They were no longer soldiers manning a radar station. They had become unwilling participants in what amounted to a first contact scenario with something that defied conventional understanding. And if the survey team's fate was any indication, this contact might prove to be far from peaceful. "One more thing, gentlemen," Harrison added, his voice dropping to an even more serious tone. "Under no circumstances are you to discuss these matters with the other personnel on base. As far as the rest of the crew knows, we're experiencing technical difficulties with some of our underground equipment. The true nature of our situation is classified at levels that exceed most of their clearances." Both men acknowledged their understanding, though Crawford wondered how long they could maintain such a deception. The other crew members weren't stupid. They had to be noticing the changes in routine, the restricted access, and the growing tension among the command staff as they prepared to leave Harrison's office. The base commander called them back. "Sergeant Crawford, Corporal Martinez, I want you both to understand something. What we're dealing with here is unprecedented. There are no protocols, no training manuals, no established procedures for this type of situation. We're going to have to rely on our judgment and each other to get through this." He paused, looking directly at each man in turn. "But I also want you to know that failure is not an option. Whatever is beneath this base cannot be allowed to reach the surface or to spread beyond this location. The implications for national security, and possibly for humanity itself, are too significant to contemplate." Crawford nodded, though he couldn't shake the feeling that they were already in far deeper than any of them truly understood. As he and Martinez made their way back to the communications bunker to begin implementing the new monitoring procedures, the sounds beneath their feet seemed louder, more insistent, as if something vast and patient was finally beginning to stir. The real nightmare at Echo 7 was just beginning.